Good morning, dear viewer and listener. Welcome to this fifth installment of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. It is a privilege once again to come to you from my office in Gaborone. Today I'm going to talk to you about a subject which is very close to my heart, which is real estate, and which is interrelated with another subject which is very close to my heart, which is law. I'm going to talk to you about the top 10 tips for collecting and dealing with difficult and recalcitrant debtors. This is important to me because I've spent the first 2 decades of my life as a lawyer practicing in Botswana, and I've spent that period has overlapped to some extent with the last 10 years when I was almost exclusively an entrepreneur in Botswana. So as entrepreneurs, especially in the real estate space, we encounter from time to time difficult customers, difficult debtors or tenants. And I've had the privilege of dealing with these difficult tenants both as a lawyer and as a real estate investor. So I think I know what it takes, and please take it from me, this is the way to do it. The first tip, the first and most important tip is to get your paperwork ready. What do I mean by that? The most important document when you collect a debt is your lease agreement. What I suggest is that you take your lease agreement and highlight the important clauses that relate to default or failure to pay on time. I'm talking about clauses that deal with the consequences of such default. Also, make sure that you have all the other documentation ready. By this I'm referring to letters of demand, I'm referring to emails that you may have written, and records of phone calls that you may have made to the debtor previously. Number 2, contact the right person. This is a very important tip. Inexperienced debt collectors tend to call the cleaner, maybe in a worst case situation, the receptionist, maybe deal with somebody who's low level like a junior accountant. No, make sure you are dealing with the right person. Who's the right person? The right person will most often be the surety, or the person who signed a suretyship at the bottom of the lease, who is committed to the obligations that are set out in the lease. In other words, I'm talking about the person, if there's a legal suit, who will be cited as the second respondent or the second defendant. So that is the person that you contact. But if that person is not available, look for the managing director. If it's not the same person, look for any other director. Look for somebody who Americans say has a skin in the game, is committed to that enterprise, so that you can deal with that person. Number 3, I beg your pardon, invite that person to your office. It's very important that you invite the debtor or the recalcitrant, difficult debtor to a neutral place. Nicely and politely persuade that person to come to your office so that you can have a discussion about the situation. Your conversation will go something like this: Mr. Recalcitrant debtor, I have in front of me this difficulty. Let us come and discuss. I'm sure you want to work your way out of this difficult situation. Come and let's work out something. 9 times out of 10, the debtor will agree to come to your office. In extreme cases, they will refuse to come, and that is a different situation that requires a different type of response. Number 4, when the recalcitrant debtor is in your office and is explaining the gloom and doom that has befallen them, they'll probably talk to you about the number of funerals they've gone to recently. They'll tell you about how the bank has moved against them. There'll be any number of disasters and calamities that they're going to tell you. Please stay focused. Empathize. Empathize. In other words, you nod your head nicely, you listen to what they're saying, but stay focused. Stay focused on the job at hand. Tip number 6. Tip number 5. Forgive me if I lose the trend of the numbers, but number 5 is the next one. Allow for the debtor to vent. This is a very important part where rookie investors or rookie collectors make mistakes. They interrupt the debtor or the recalcitrant when he talks endlessly about their problem. No, 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 you don't interrupt them. Allow them to vent, allow them to cry even, and empathize. But as soon as you've empathized, as soon as you've expressed your sympathies and apologies about what has happened, go back to the task at hand. And remind them that, look, in terms of the lease agreement, you've said that the rent is non-negotiable, and there is a clause that specifically says you cannot withhold the rent under any circumstances. So these are some of the circumstances that are covered, therefore the rent has to be paid. I sometimes even remind them that in order of priority, the rent comes first, and then food, shelter, and clothing comes next. In other words, the landlord is always number one. Now, you go to number 6, tip number 6, you must gently and forcefully explain the legal consequences of default. In the lease agreement, there's a specific clause that deals with this, that tells you, the debtor, what happens in terms of the legal suit. There's a clause also that talks about interest that continues to accrue, how much interest is going to accumulate and compound against that debtor. You can even mention to the debtor or the recalcitrant debtor the dangers of bankruptcy against his estate. You must remind them of the potential embarrassment of having a deputy sheriff come in, remove all their assets, and having all that published in the government gazette and in the local newspapers. Remind them of the ugly consequences of default and say to them, please, my friend, let us do our best to avoid heading in that direction. Number 7, offer the debtor an opportunity to sign an AOD. What is an AOD? An AOD is an acknowledgement of debt. That is very, very important. An acknowledgement of debt is a legal document which secures your interests as a collector, as a company, in terms of setting out how and when the payments are going to be made, the amount of payments that are going to be made, and how you're going to resolve the difficulty of the outstanding debt. Number 8, I repeat, show compassion. And this I repeat because it's so important. Show compassion and show integrity at all times, while at the same time politely insisting on payment. This one is important to emphasize. Number 9, if the debtor or the defaulter does not seem to have any assets, and if the debtor or the defaulter or the recalcitrant defaulter does not have any meaningful prospect of paying you, it's very important that you give them a way out. In some of our leases, we say that we can lock the property out if the debtor doesn't pay for a period of 2 to 3 months. In other situations, you may have to go to court, but it's even better if you can enter into an agreement with the debtor and get them to voluntarily leave your premises. I've read in America that landlords, where it's very difficult in certain states to evict tenants, even pay the tenant to leave. Sometimes it works out cheaper to pay them to leave rather than to go to court. But thankfully in Botswana, our judicial system is still friendly towards landlords. Number 9, confirm all discussions. Confirm all discussions that you enter into so that you have a record of what you have discussed and agreed. It is very, very important that after every single conversation, there has to be an email or a letter confirming the arrangements that have been entered into. This is very important from a legal standpoint. If there's ever a dispute, you must show the paper trail indicating that you've done all you can to work something out. Number 11 principle for dealing with difficult and recalcitrant debtors. I always throw a bonus at you, dear listener, dear viewer. This bonus is that when dealing with that recalcitrant debtor, avoid at all costs allowing their problems to become your problems. Remember that you have a responsibility towards your employees, you have a responsibility towards your bankers, you have a responsibility towards keeping your company afloat. Do not take over the obligations of the tenant. In other words, in as much as you have to be empathetic, in as much as you have to be gentle, do not allow yourself to lose money where the obligation of payment is taken over by you. What do I mean by that? I mean a situation where you end up writing off the debt, a situation where you end up putting your business in jeopardy. It's much better to have that debtor acknowledge their indebtedness and make sure that you will be able to pursue them when their financial circumstances improve tomorrow. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That is another episode of Mogobe's Top 10 Tips for dealing with recalcitrant and difficult debtors. Thank you. Bye.